In this video, I would like to give you some guidelines on how to complete the BTEC Level 3 set task on Unit 2, Construction Design. I'm going to use a past paper from 2018 that it's available to download from Pearson's website. You can also download the marking scheme and the examiner's report if you wish. Every set task has the same sections, but with a different case study. The briefing also has the drawing of the site plan, an extract of the borehole report, and 2 pictures of the site and surroundings. The set task has 5 activities. Activities 1, 2, and 3 are written activities. In Activity 4, you need to draw freehand sketches, and in Activity 5, you need to draw using software like AutoCAD, SketchUp, or Revit. Now, I will go over each activity one by one. Activity 1. Design factors and constraints. Communicate the following to the client: the design factors and constraints of the project and site, the likely impact and influence of the design factors and constraints on the design and specification of the project. To be able to answer this question, first you need to understand what design factors and constraints are. Design factors are the considerations and requirements that designers need to take into account when designing a construction project. Constraints are limitations or restrictions that affect the planning, design, and construction of the project. They are important because they can influence various aspects of the project. Here you have a list of different design factors, and here you have a list of different constraints. When you answer the question, you won't need to explain all these design factors and constraints, only the ones that are relevant to the scenario. How to start with this activity? First of all, you need to read carefully the briefing and identify all the design factors and constraints. Then, you need to explain in detail how they might influence the design. And finally, you need to offer solutions to the problems. Scenario. You are working as an assistant to the design manager, which means that you are part of the design team, and your company has been awarded a contract to design and build a block of retirement living apartments. The client's vision. The client is a large national company that wishes to provide a block of 65 retirement living apartments for the over 60s. This is a design factor related to functionality because the design needs to meet the functional needs of its users. For over the 60s, it's a design factor related to accessibility. Every building must be accessible for people of all ages and abilities, but especially this one because the age of the users is going to be over 60. People with disabilities and individuals with limited mobility must be able to use the building with ease and without encountering barriers to access. How can we do this? Ramps, lifts, wide doorways. The apartments will need to provide a secure place to live with the option to socialize with other residents. This is a design factor related to security, so how can you ensure this is a secure place? Restricting access, CCTV, intrusion detection systems. Communal areas will provide a coffee bar, hairdressing facilities, and an exercise room. This is related to the spatial requirements, which is part of another question. Externally, a roof garden and landscaped gardens should be provided. This is related to functionality, but also to sustainability. The client is keen to create a modern, which is related to aesthetics, environmentally friendly and sustainable site, which is related to sustainability, that considers the use of light, which is related to functionality, and is finished to a high specification, which is related to quality. How can this influence the design? One way can be with the selection of materials that can give the building a modern look, sustainable materials, and high quality materials. You need to specify which materials can achieve this. Site details. Here we can find some of the site constraints. For example, the site size, which is 40 meters by 30 meters. There is a 500 millimeters difference in the ground level. This is related to topography. The site plan is shown in figure 1, where we can see the shape and the orientation. Subsoil ground conditions are shown in figure 2. Figure 2 is the extract of a borehole report, where we can see that the ground table is quite high and that the firm soil is approximately 5 meters below ground level. This is going to affect the design because we will have to choose the right foundation, which in this case could be pile foundation. Cotswold stone buildings to the north and low-rise brick and render buildings to the west is a description of the adjacent buildings that we need to consider in the design of our building. Site delivery access is restricted to a small turning off the high street. This can influence the design because this means that big vehicles during the construction process may not be able to reach the site. General project information. The total budget for the project is 8.5 million. This is a cost constraint. We need good planning and control to ensure correct budget spend. 9-month construction program. This is a time constraint. There is a set time for the contract to be completed, and we should be considering prefabricated methods if time is critical. Brownfield site, formerly occupied by 1970s office block. When we have a brownfield site, the main concern is contamination. In this case, the previous use was an office block, so probably there is no problem with this, although it needs to be checked. The site is cleared and ready for excavation. This is related to the site conditions. Aesthetic requirements. Whilst the design should be sympathetic to the surrounding architecture, this is related to aesthetics, it should be modern and contemporary, which is also related to aesthetics, to make the building have an architectural impact on the local area. We can consider this as a cultural factor. Incorporate sustainable landscaping solutions to enhance and improve the character of the site. This is related to sustainability. How can this influence the design? You need to decide the style, the design, the materials, the colors. You need to create a modern building, but also ensuring a visual integration. What sustainable landscaping solutions can you use? Rain harvesting, permeable paving, swales, use of native plants. Spatial requirements. In activity 2, you will have to write about spatial requirements, but here we can find some design factors and constraints. The design is restricted to a 5-story building. This is related to planning constraints. A condition of planning consent states that the building footprint must not occupy more than 85% of the total site area. This is planning constraints as well. In the next activity, we will calculate the building footprint. Service requirements. All floors can be accessed via a lift or a staircase. This is related to accessibility. Provide direct natural light and ventilation in the form of windows that occupants can open and close themselves. This is related to functionality. This is the available space that you have to complete the activity. 4 pages in total. Activity 2. Initial project brief. Your manager has asked you to produce an initial project brief to include spatial requirements, the site project outcomes, site information, and budget requirements. Use the client brief as a starting point to develop and analyze. Spatial requirements. You need to identify spatial requirements in the briefing and how they affect the design. For example, number of stories, location of different facilities in the building, requirements of a disabled person, external area of the building. In the spatial requirements and service requirements sections, you have all the information that you need to answer this question. Use this as a starting point. Don't just copy it. You need to write about access, circulation spaces, different areas. We need to calculate the total surface of the building. The site is 40 times 30, which is 1,200 meters square. The building footprint must not occupy more than 85%. I need to calculate the 85% of this number. So I will multiply 1,200 times 0.85, which is 1,025 meters square. If the building has 5 stories, means that we have to times it by 5. And the answer is 5,100 meters square. Desired project outcomes. You will need to explain how to meet the client's vision, how to finish within the program period, how the building meets the requirements of a disabled person or wheelchair user, and which sustainable solutions you chose for the project. Maybe you have already written about this in activity 1, but in this activity you will need to expand on it. Here you have the client's vision, 9-month construction program, so there is a set time for the contract to be completed. If the time is critical, you need to consider using prefabricated methods. Sustainable landscaping solutions, you need to explain and specify which ones are you going to use for the project. And direct natural light and ventilation, how are you going to achieve this? Site information. You need to identify the site details in the briefing and explain how they affect the design. Size and type of site, topography, subsoil conditions, contamination, adjacent buildings, access for every user, and issues with large vehicles for deliveries. Again, you maybe have already mentioned about all this in activity 1, but you have to expand a little more. The subsoil ground conditions are shown in the borehole report. The borehole report is going to give us information about the type of soil, groundwater, varying capacity of the soil. The groundwater table is going to be quite high, and this has different implications. It can affect the works because it will fill up the excavations. It needs to be removed, which means extra costs. It can also affect the foundation of the building. The concrete could be damaged by sulfates. The borehole report is also telling us at what depth a firm bed is found for the foundations to be constructed, and in this case, the firm soil will be approximately 5 meters below ground level. The best option for this situation will be pile foundation. Site delivery access is restricted to a small street. This could affect the type of method of construction because very big vehicles are not going to be able to reach the site. The site is a brownfield. This could be a problem related to contamination, but if the previous use was an office block, maybe it's not a problem, although this needs to be checked. An advantage of being a brownfield site is that all the infrastructure like drainage, electricity, roads, it's already there. Budget requirements. You need to break down the costs required for different elements of the projects. Land purchase. We can consider that the land has already been bought for this example. Surveys, site investigations, building surveys, planning permission, building regulations approval, inspections and other permissions, consultants and design team fees, construction costs, insurances, and contingencies. A construction contingency is a part of a project's budget to put aside to cover any unforeseen costs. To be able to calculate a rough estimation of the cost of the project, first we are going to calculate an estimation of the construction costs. I will explain this later. And then we are going to add different percentages. For example, for surveys, it will be a 2%, planning, permission, building regulations, inspections, 2%, consultants, 12%, insurances, 2%, contingencies, 2%. This is a total of 20% that we need to add to the construction costs. The total budget for this project is 8.5 million. You will have to research on the cost per meter squared of similar buildings, and then you will have to write down the source where you found this information. In 2024, we are going to consider that the price could be something between 1,900 and 2,200. But the number that I'm going to use is 1,600. And I will use this because the set exam that I'm using as an example is from 2018, and also because this number is going to be convenient for me for these calculations, and this is just an example. In a previous question, I found out that the maximum area of the building, if it has 5 stories, is 5,100 meters squared. To calculate an estimation of the budget, I need to multiply the area by the price of meter squared. And this is 8,160,000. If I add the 20% of the other costs, the total is 9.8 million pounds, which is bigger than the total budget that we have. In activity 3, I have calculated the area that I need to meet the requirements of 65 rooms, and this is 4,415 meters squared. In activity 3, I will show you how to calculate this number. Now I'm going to calculate the same estimation, but with 4,415. The 20% of this is and if I add this together, the total cost is which is nearly 8.5 million. In this question, you also need to mention the need of a quantity surveyor to manage the budget and contractual relationship of the building project. The quantity surveyor has the role of planning and controlling to ensure correct budget spend. Bonuses and penalties are contractual provisions often included in construction contracts to incentivize timely completion, quality workmanship, and adherence to project specifications. This is the available space that you have to complete the activity. 1 page per bullet point, 4 pages in total. Activity 3. Building size, form, and type of construction. You have been asked to recommend and justify an outline solution to the client that meets their vision and requirements, considering the possible size of the building, form and type of construction. Building size. We need to calculate the building footprint, calculate and justify the total area required, and we're going to consider a 20% for circulation space. We will also find out how many floors we need. The size of the site is 40 times 30, 1,200 meters squared. The footprint is the 85%, and this is 1,020 meters squared. Now I'm going to calculate the area that I need according to the spatial requirements. I need 65 one and two bedroom apartments. In my design, communal social areas, facilities for hairdressing, and the exercise room are going to be in the ground floor with the manager's apartment, security control reception area, and the small meeting room. There are 65 apartments. Some of them have one room and some of them have two rooms. I have decided that the ones with one room are 40 meters squared and the ones with two rooms are 55 meters squared. I also have decided that I have 50 apartments of one room and 15 apartments of two rooms. If I multiply 40 times 50, I have 2000 meters squared, which is the area of the apartments with one room, and 55 times 15, 825 meters squared, and this is the area of the apartments with two rooms. If I add this together, I have 2,825 meters squared. Now I'm going to add 20% to consider circulation spaces, including stairs and lifts. 20% of 2,825 is 565. If I add this to 2,825, the total is 3,390. Now I'm going to add the ground floor, which is 1,025, and this is 4,415 meters squared, and this is the number that I used to calculate or to estimate the budget. You need to explain the impact of the building in the area and also justify aspects of sustainability, in this case the roof garden and the sustainable landscaping solutions that you chose. Form of construction. You will need to decide which form of construction you are going to use for this building. On-site construction or off-site construction, which is usually quicker and with a higher quality. Some examples of modular construction are timber frame or structural insulated panels. You could also be using frame construction made out of steel, precast concrete, or in situ concrete. Only in the case you have a type of building where you need long spans, which means long distances between supports, like for example a warehouse, you can use portal frame made out of steel, precast concrete, or glulam. You need to justify your selection of the type of construction, so ensure that you research to be able to write about different advantages of that form of construction. You will also have to justify the foundation type. In a previous question, we already justified that in this case study we will need pile foundation. Explain again the reasons why we need this type of foundation. In this question, you will also have to justify the type of floors, roofs, cladding materials that you're going to use. Ensure that you are justifying the selection of all materials. This is the available space that you have to answer this question. 5 pages in total. Activity 4, sketches. The design manager has asked you to produce annotated sketches of your initial idea to include a 3D external view of the whole building, a plan view of one of the one-bedroom apartments, An internal view showing a 3D pictorial representation of one of the one-bedroom apartments. Your annotations must include dimensions, key features of the design, the operation of the building, and how the design meets the needs of the client. To draw a 3D external view of the whole building, you can use one of these 3 projections. It will depend on your skills drawing. The easiest one is the oblique projection, which is this. One of the faces, one of the elevations, you can see it true size. The next one is the isometric projection. And the third one, it's a 2-point perspective. A plan view, which is the floor plan. An internal view showing a 3D pictorial representation. To draw this sketch, use a 1-point perspective. It is essential to attempt all 3 drawings. The 3 views need to relate to each other. This means that your internal view, it's an internal view from your floor plan, and your floor plan is part of the whole building. All your sketches need to be fully annotated with dimensions, key features of the design, like for example the materials, with also the reasons why you chose those materials, the operation of the building, showing the access, distribution, circulation, and so that you are meeting all the client's requirements. This is the available space that you will have for the sketches. Remember to leave some space for the annotations. Activity 5. Virtual modeling of the design. You have been asked to use CAD software to develop a 3D virtual model of your design for the external envelope, interior of one of the one-bedroom apartments. Print out your rendered 3D image, scale to fit 1 A4 sheet for each of the following: the external envelope and the interior of the one-bedroom apartment. To complete this activity, you will need to draw using a software like AutoCAD, SketchUp or Revit. You need to draw the external envelope, which is going to be something quite similar to your hand drawing sketch. And you also have to draw the interior of the room. Try to choose a view where you can see the inside. Requirements of the drawings. The features of the project can be seen in the chosen views. The drawings include features like doors and windows. You can present multiple drawings with different angles. There is a clear relationship between the external and the internal drawings. The design meets the requirements of the client's vision. The images are accurately produced and complete. The images need to be rendered. And these are the 5 activities. Good luck!